explanatory psychopathology approaches, I want to criticize them a little bit. And what could phenomenology contribute to our psychopathology approaches? And if we have any time left, I will include theology as well a little bit. As clinicians, psychopathology is our kind of privilege. It is the basis of the legitimacy of our profession. It is like a privilege. It is like a right for us. So that's why psychopathology is a must. It you have to have that. And so what does it mean? What is the definition? We have to ask that if we are working as a clinician on that. Well, most people here in the hall would have a consensus over a definition of, etiology, development, symptoms, are the areas of or subjects of psychopathology, and psychopathology is the science that deals with these issues and mental problems. We could stop there and have a consensus on that. Of course, questioning never stops, but we have something to ask very clearly. If the object of psychopathology is the mind, what do we mean by the mind? This is a question that follows naturally. So what is the mind? Let's suspend this question in the air for a while, and let's look at the etymology of psychopathology. Psychopathology, as you know, is derived from ancient Greece, pathos, logia, and pistische. Pathos and logia, you know that there is no confusion about that. Pathos is the suffering, and logia is the study or research. And so pathology, for a long time, has been known as the science of diseases. So, what does psyche mean? In ancient Greece, it is more equivalent to soul or it's usually considered as a spirit or mind or life. There are many equivalences for that. That's why we don't call it ruhsal or spiritual in Turkish, but we use the word zihin, which means mind. Of course, we could go into detail about those, but we don't really have that much time. And we always talk about the mental or mental disorders and mind. So we go back to the question, what is the mind? What does it mean? Psyche. There are similar definitions everywhere. I want to give you a definition of APA, and I can show you that definition. As you can see here, in APA definition, there are two definitions, which is one of them is a broader definition, the other one is narrower. It's a very popular concept.
The mathematicians are interested, the biologists do have happen to be interested, the philosophers are interested as well, but it's very interesting that the physicians, the physicists are interested with mind. So, APA defines it as a system of activities, a device of activities and the phenomena in all social and psychological and scientific processes in the narrower meaning, in the narrower sense. Of course, there is a topology in all, as in all the definitions. We have to go back to that and ask ourselves what intellectual means or what psychological means, and we can give them some vague answers like the mind related, or some give some covert definitions on the other terms or terminology within the definition. But yeah, we can take this definition and we can go back to the part that concerns the clinicians. We have to ask the following question. You may think that I ask too many questions. And you would be saying that, and rightly so, but this is one of my characteristics. It's a part of my personality. So if psychopathology is a science of mind and mental disorders, and since we are clinicians, we are tackling with the issues, then we should be encountering this type of mind and mental disorders. This assumption needs to be made. Is it so then? Yes, why not? A physician friend, a clinician friend, colleague can say that the answer is yes, that they run into such issues in the daily practice in the clinic. But when I ask myself about the issues I'm facing in my daily routine, by the way, I do interviews with patients almost every day. And after each and every interview, when I think to myself about the issue that I have just faced, I normally give the answer that the issue that I'm facing is normally the daily routine of the patients. The sequence of events that happen to the patient's experiences. What I am facing in the clinician, in the interview with the patients, are not the separate mental device. Well, I can think of it as such, but then the issues I'm facing with the patients and the supporting or accompanying, so to say, better to say, I won't say producing or the reason. As a clinician, I'm always face to face with the experience and the self of the patient. And it does not really matter whether I think that this issue is a mental disorder or it's a question of mind, etc. But as a clinician, I face the issues of the patient, and the question is whether I will downgrade it to a phenomenon. This is vital for me if I am a practitioner, which I am. And I do not consider the issues as epiphenomena. This is the phenomenon in my practice. So, clinically, the issue that the clinician faces, the problems that the clinicians need to solve, can be thought as a mental device or a personality of the patient. But these two are different perspectives and they have their own individual grounds for that. But in short, in practice, they are two different individual views. And the clinician needs to be aware of his daily practices, and thereby the clinician can build up his own way of treatment for the patients. But we should be aware of these two different perspectives. I should open it up. These two perspectives maybe the latter that that the issues that we tackle with the patients are the mental devices and so on. Maybe it can make us make us closer to the problem that we are facing in this presentation. But I mainly regard the issues that I'm facing with the interviews with the patients as experiences and the self of the patients. So maybe we should mention symptoms in the mind. This psychopathology and descriptive psychopathology is the two divisions made by Sims, and their definitions are on the board. This explanatory psychopathology are mainly theoretical, and it's more existential. It's within the framework of theory. And the ones who try to explain the situation with the existential means, they are explanatory psychopathology. If the clinician tries to explain the situation by the symptoms of the patient, by the behavior of the patient, which are both related with the subject of the or the perpetuator of the action, and the endeavor to understand the behaviors and not including any assumptions, then you are descriptive psychopathology or psychopathologist, let's say. The distinction between these two must be well understood. By the way, I'm very distracted because the door is open. I'm not young anymore, so if I was any younger, I would definitely not care about that. And when I was younger, I would definitely be bored with these kind of conferences, but now I'm old. Okay, thank you for closing the door of the hall. Thanks. Okay, so the distinction between these two needs to be better explained. As time will allow me, I will try to explain it to you. The explanatory psychopathology, as Sims puts forward, is more causative, and it's a theoretical framework. It's also more scientific. In the nature sciences, you can see this type of thinking a lot. In this journal, this is what we do. This is the amateur spirit that we have. Publishing a journal is very, a work of passion. It's always an amateur spirit. If you're interested in dreams, you can find some serious resource in this journal that we have published. And phenomenologic oriented therapy is one of the articles that we published in this magazine. It says that in order to understand a structure or a process, we first understand the elements that this structure or the process is comprised of. We ask another question, how the process works or structure works. There should be no deficiency to understand the structures or processes. What's the function of the structure or the processes? In order to understand these phenomenon, we need to ask and answer these questions. The physical phenomenon present us relatively sharp information. I don't want to branch out a lot because I want to use the time as efficiently as possible. At the end of the 19th century, the psychology existed in the paradigm of the natural sciences. This was the general effort, at least. There were two dominant schools: psychoanalysis and behaviorism shared that paradigm. And natural sciences work like that. Their function is like that. And about the physical phenomena, these questions are righteous, and we can develop information over asking these questions. But a new question, and as a clinician, I think most of you are clinicians as well. The phenomena that we are interested in are not as the ones that a botanicist or a botanist or a physicist would be interested in. So we would also ask whether these phenomena are natural or not. In this point, I will skip to phenomenology. I'd like to talk about Brentano. Maybe you heard about him. He's not very well known, but he was an important psychologist and a thinker, a man of thought. Franz Brentano was an important science person. He was a German psychologist, lived in 1850s, no, 1870s, in Universität Wien, and he gave lectures about introduction to psychopathology, and his students included Freud, speculated to include Freud, and Russell was one of his most popular students. So genetic psychology and descriptive psychology are different according to Brentano. Genetic psychology is a third-person psychology, and it's problematic. And he defends the idea that the psychology should be descriptive. In our practice, I don't know, whether what Brentano says is still valid. He says that a psychologist, well, here says psychologist, we can include psychiatrists as well, need to ask himself or herself that question. We need to define the problem. We need to define the issue first, without explaining, without describing this issue later on. So this is a problematic. So in phenomenology, it could be maybe touching upon linking to phenomenology. Brentano divides phenomenon into two parts: the cognitive and the conscious phenomenon. There are 6 differentiating characteristics, one of which is intentionality, which takes an important space in philosophy, especially in the school of phenomenology, even in today. So this cognitive phenomena are directive. So consciousness is always a consciousness of something. Is a quote from Brentano, which affected me a lot, and I couldn't really grasp the meaning of it when I first read that quotation from him. And now I am, starting to grasp the meaning of it. So the consciousness is always the consciousness of something. This is what it is. But in the history of thinking, it does not appear so all the time. So it's orientational. This consciousness is orientational. This is very important because it has a deeper meaning. In summary, I should say that, as you know, in general, from a dichotomy, from a duology, the spirit, body, or the body, mind, and so on, the human has never escaped from this duology, but phenomenology is like the endeavor to escape from this duology. Let's take Descartes, who has a Cartesian view. There are two theses, but there is a relation between them. There's a correlation between them. You have to either downgrade one over to the other, or you have to create a Cartesian way of thinking. There is no third way. This phenomenology is trying to, establish that third road. Whether it has succeeded yet, in my opinion, yes, to some extent. So this word, conscious is always the conscious of something, becomes important here. So we are clinicians, we are not philosophers, of course, but these words are important for us as well, because in our room, in our clinic, the patients who visit us, the individuals, let's call them phenomenon. The phenomena we are facing with, and in order to understand, in order to attribute meaning to these phenomena, we have to do something, and this division of Sims needs to be remembered. Empathy and empathy, concept of empathy being included in the descriptive psychopathology because of these reasons, because when you face the issue with an explanatory attitude, then you cannot build an empathic relationship with the phenomena. So at this point, we have to talk about Husserl after Brentano, and derive some takeaway lessons for our own practice in our clinics. Husserl is regarded as the founder of phenomenology, but actually the tradition of phenomenology is much ancient, much more ancient. Though I'm sorry, not Hegel, Husserl is a milestone, and he is accepted as the founder of the phenomenology. It's an interesting way of thinking, led by Heidegger and Pontesart later on. But Husserl and his views are very important for our clinic point of view. Husserl also proposes a method. So phenomenology is also a name of a methodology. A methodology that he proposes is called epoche. So being the right clinician or treatment and so on. But their idea, of course, was the correct information. So they were chasing knowledge, not treatment as we do. But the epoche, not about their purpose, but maybe about our purpose, not about their purpose, but about our purpose, is the main and fundamental method of our practice. So suspending or putting in brackets the natural attitude, and Husserl says that we live our perspective, but it's never sufficient to reach a phenomenon, because we have lots of assumptions and rules and beliefs to reach that phenomenon. We have to suspend all our previous knowledge and assumptions in order to understand what phenomena is. And after you suspend all your previous knowledge and assumptions, you have to look at what is left in your hands, and you have to work on it. So this is like a very practical and useful method in our clinical practice, in my opinion. Maybe you can give it a thought as well. And this definition is sufficient in order to understand the importance of phenomenology. If we had time, I would have talked about the psychiatry's history from Freud, from Beck, with two examples from their own lives, and how we can better understand the explanatory and the descriptive approaches. But I can give you just one sentence. Beck's automatic thinking's discoveries, as he says, as you may have read, and Fatih knows better than I do. Beck says that the automatic thoughts can only be discovered when the explanatory approach is left and the theologic attitude is being transited to. And this is the time this is the time when he, is surprised by the result he reaches. He makes this discovery about the automatic thoughts. This is the theologic attitude which is important. It is an epoche. So how much time do I have? I don't know. So this is the time I have left with. It's so few. So little. So I'd like to make an introduction to dreams, at least in 10 minutes. In this 10 minutes, we can, clear many blurry or vague points. I had a slide about that, this explanatory attitude. A clinician thinks about the experienced mental disorders causes is the business of the clinician. And a young person, a young colleague of mine told me that the reasons of these problems can be solved with the practices of a clinician and not well-known clinician. I said, okay, you can go. Just the other day, he came back and he told me that, he told me that his experience was connected with his great-great-grandfather's experiences 4 generations ago. So this is an explanation, is an extreme example of an explanation. What we do is more objective, of course, but still it is an explanation of the issues experienced by the patient. There are a lot of explanations, and we need them. So, about explanations and the traps of explanations, because they set traps, Nietzsche can help us out here. And maybe we can drive a connection between what Nietzsche says and our clinical practice. So 4 big mistakes or 4 big wrong ideas Nietzsche has. He says that feeling good or bad or talking about the plain truth is never sufficient. This is, by the way, a phenomenological statement. He says the psychological explanation of our moods is to think something we know as the reason or cause of another thing that we do not know. The assumption of causality is always dominant. It's about systematization, and it believes us and excludes all the explanations, etc. So this is what Nietzsche says. he was a very clever person. He was a euphoric and clever person in this matter. So thinking about the theories and the history of psychology, there is always an assumption of casuality, intensified in systemization, and excludes all the other reasons and explanations apart from the result of our casual thinking. And there is, a psychological side of casual thinking as well. We always say that, but Nietzsche was the first person to claim that because of its, relieving, characteristics. But there is a problem here. This casuality needs to be suspended in order to create a therapeutic relationship between us and the patient, according to phenomenology. This requires, in my opinion, such a phenomenological attitude. Of course, we won't have the time to evaluate all these attitudes, but as I was writing and thinking about this, Hassan called me, offered me a speech here today, and I told him on the phone that I could talk about psychopathology and phenomenology relationship. As I was thinking over what I could say here today, I thought about sharing one of the texts I have written. I don't know how understandable it will be, but here I go.
As I mentioned, we have to ask ourselves if psychopathology is about the mind and the mental disorders. What is it that we encounter? Is it about individual? Is it about the ego? Or if we think of it as a phenomenon? In clinical practice, the self that I can see is not what Descartes said or what Kant said in transcendental ego or what Freud said. It is my experience. It is a self that is related to my experience. And this experience becomes me and my experience. So in my experience exists in a different self that transcends itself. It is such a self that it is relieved from the fright, the pains, the enemies. Maybe I want to categorize them. Maybe I want to define them. But before explaining or naming them, I have to make it exist in my experience or its experience. I have to be so aware and so careful that I shouldn't leave their experiences behind or outside and my experiences outside. What I'm trying to do is to come as close to it as possible. The explanation of an experience actually makes it impossible for the explanation or definition of an experience. So how many more minutes do I have? 15 minutes. Okay. So let's talk 5 minutes more about dreams a little bit, maybe 3, 4 more sentences. So my experience is even more in this area. So if we can meet in the workshop, I can explain more. We will have more time. But for those who won't make it there, I could say a couple of words. I have talked about dreams in similar platforms many times, so I didn't want to base my speech on dreams because of that. Dreams, mathematically or in terms of their numbers or counts, I hear a lot of different dreams. But how do I look at dreams? How do I handle them? Dreams are something that is lived for me. It is not a reflection of self or the subject. It is life itself. It is not the waking life. It is a life that is unaware of its life. So I want to say two things. Phenomenal self and dream self was a study, was a paper that we wrote before. So according to me, I say according to me, but this is so obvious to me that it seems funny almost. The experience of dream is just like any experience in the awakened state or the waking state. There is a self, and the subject feels the same experience just like any real life experience. It is not different. For example, you can say that you saw yourself as a fish in your dream, or you can see yourself as a body of water, as a butterfly, but that is still self. Okay, so it is a life. It is not different from normal life. You can understand the difference if you read Freud's book on dreams. There are two things that attract the attention, which is almost impossible to be wrong about. He says that in form, yes, there are differences. In terms of form, for example, memory or causality, there is no causality in dreams. There are a lot of differences in terms of the form. But when you look at the phenomenological side, it is a life, an experience, and in the center of this experience is self. So, if you want to understand the dream, for example, let's say, I don't think there is anyone older than me in this hall, but if you said, Hocam, what do you feel right now? If you subjectively wonder what my life is like or what I'm feeling like, you can never understand that with a third eye or with some assumptions. You cannot understand that. You actually have to ask me. And Beck actually did the same thing. He asked the patient. You have to ask me if you want to learn about my life, my experience, how I'm feeling. This is very subjective. I can tell you, I can explain you. Just like Heidegger said, phenomenon is actually, in Greek, it means self-explanatory, or it's something that presents itself. I can talk to you about my experience. And if dreams are an experience too, and if you want to understand the dream, you have to ask the subject of the dream, right? If I am seeing the dream, then you have to ask me. If you ask me that, I can tell you about it, or 10 days ago, let's say, any event, if you ask me about any event that I experienced 10 days ago, it's the same thing. I will still go back to myself in that time, 10 days ago, and I will tell you what happened to me. So the dreams and telling the dreams basically is the same. You can also see the articles, the papers that we published. We do trainings and supervision work in that sense in these fields, and I benefit from them. To be honest, I have to say that. You know, how does it happen? You know, in therapy, Johan always asks, how can these young people stay so much away from these dreams? Or, you know, young people who we are doing surveillance work on, they say that the literature around dreams was really scary for them at the beginning. I always find it fascinating and surprising that, dreams, which is a very good material in our field, how is it possible that it's not handled right? Or how is it possible that it's not really analyzed more? In my practice and with friends and colleagues who are interested, we work together. I don't really know about children or adolescents. I work with adults, and there are people who come for trainings and pediatric psychiatrists as well. And I always tell them, I work with adults, and there could be some risks involved in working with children, with pediatric patients. But as long as I can hear, based on the feedback that I get from them, I can still say that it still works on children too. Apparently, if you have any questions, any contributions, maybe if the chair here would allow us for 5 minutes and extend our time for 5 more minutes. I would like to hear your questions or any comments. Thank you very much.